Hello everyone, it is time for the last part of the Q&A of me going over all the questions you guys sent, so let's get into the final ones. What's a good sign to take a break? I know a lot of comp players push themselves to the point of having no enjoyment. Honestly, I'm not sure. It's different from person to person, but I can only talk about my own experience, which is if I'm not really having as much fun or feel like I'm not making progress, I tend to take a break. I haven't really talked about it as much, but since a few months after Last Resort died until like September, I was basically on a competitive break where I played scrims, but I did not try hard or win tournaments for quite a while because I felt I needed a little bit to just focus on myself. So it can happen when you think you need to. Don't be afraid to take a break. Something I've always wondered is how do competitive players handle stress and severe losing streaks? So I'm going to pair this with a similar question I got later down, which is, do competitive players get tournament nerves and how do they deal with that? Which is, yes, even top players get tournament nerves. Have you guys ever seen a top team in a tournament, they're in a really intense set, and they start getting really loud or they start talking other players a little bit? That is almost always a response to tournament nerves. Comms are a great way to deal with mental, to try to keep the energy up and hype each other up because you need to be ready to make clutch plays happen and not be down when you're losing. Are the players in comp teams friends with each other or just acquaintances? I don't know if you're talking about like competitive teams with each other or just people on the same team, but I have very rarely seen a team of people together who do not end up being friends. You're going to be spending most days of the week hanging out with each other, so you're probably going to build a friendship there. In terms of other teams with each other, the answer is sometimes. Do not assume that people from different teams on the same skill level are just automatically friends with each other. A lot of them interact more because they scrim or do tournaments against each other more often, which makes it more likely, but it doesn't mean it happens. You guys ever get angry with each other, like if someone screwed up? Yeah, of course. Especially at a top level, when big mistakes happen, people do get upset with each other. What matters is being able to talk it out in an appropriate way with each other and, keep it to the stuff about the game. There's healthy ways of going about it and unhealthy ways of doing it. But these important big discussions when you need major change to happen are going to happen. What is one of the biggest differences between the game of play at a high level versus a low level? I'm gonna just more talk about the differences of play as you go up because the main difference really is just pacing. Top level games happen much faster. You get a better and better understanding of what positions you can take, how quickly you can move with your specials, or what kind of spots you can just walk into in general as you get higher up. So the main difference is that at lower level, there is a significantly higher amount of missed opportunities to make something happen. The higher up you go, the more people use them. I hear a lot about weapons that aren't viable competitively, whether that be the weapon itself or its kit. In theory, could any weapon be played at the competitive level with enough practice? No. Some weapons just do not have the tools to thrive, or even if they in theory could, like a lot of the higher skill investment ones, if players are going to take the time to play a weapon that's difficult, they're going to pick one that's good. I think a good example of this is something like H3. In theory, H3 could work, but if you're going to invest the amount of time to be good at H3, you could invest that time into something else that's probably better. And most players who are in theory good enough to win with H3 already understand this and write off the weapon from the get-go. Which sucks, and trust me, I don't want to be the person to go here and be like, yeah, no, not every weapon can win, but that is the reality. What nerfs and buffs do you believe would make the meta as flawless as possible? Right now, I think the biggest issue is Pencil hurting a lot of anchor diversity, but I also think the main special trio of Big Bubbler, Zuka, and Tri-Strike are all incredibly unhealthy, and I would focus on nerfing those down a little bit to reduce the power level of specials as a whole, and buffing a few of the weaker specials so that we got to see more options with a bit more depth and had a bit more variety in team comps. There's a lot more I could say because that's a very large topic, but in a brief nutshell, that's what I think is most important for improving the health of the game. Should solo queue players play like top level players with defined roles and coordination or focus on being more aggressive and selfish? I'm gonna tell you guys a little secret. At the highest level of the game, roles kind of break down in general. If you look at some of the best pencils, they will often play more risky to take fights or go for damage rather than just focusing on paint and cooler output. Every single player has to play to what needs to happen the most, and at a high level, that's what top players are very good at. They're quite flexible. Likewise, in solo queue, you cannot just paint bot the whole time or run and get kills the whole time. You have to look at what your team isn't doing and cover it. So the correct answer is none of these. Be flexible. Macaroni says, what do you think of the lack of Western competitive content? So originally I had a different answer for this, but as of going into 2025, there's a good amount of top players who are actually starting to upload content. Why did it take this long? Probably because it wasn't discussed as important before, and top players are already pretty busy, competing. Of course though, the bare minimum of uploading VODs to YouTube should have happened sooner, but at least it's here now. Hopefully, with that, as well as Senduing VODs being a bit more active, we can start to get competitive VODs a little bit more out there. What determines or influences which fan-organized tournaments or events that competitive players or high-level players attend? Oftentimes it depends on if the format is really applicable for the players it's trying to appeal to. For example, top-level tournaments generally try to have some kind of good stream or a zones-only format because that's what's popular. But it depends what type of group you're appealing to, and you also have to get your name out there. If it's a tournament hosted by IPL that has a lot of brand recognition from a notable tournament organization, it's going to have a lot better a chance of getting out there. How do teams adapt themselves to the meta shifting? It depends on the teams themselves, but at a higher level, there's a lot of evaluation to me of, okay, the meta is shifting this way, do we have any pieces that aren't going to work and can we change them? If it's yes, then players will try to adapt in a way that fits the team setting, usually through a lot of experimentation. What do you think about competitive meta inertia? More often than not, it feels like things take months to get discovered and implemented in tournaments. Like how it took people several patches to realize end lag on missiles made them spammable in S2, or Snipe Rider was a sleeper top tier on its release. I see this viewpoint a lot, and I think it's really easy to see something that becomes meta later on and go, oh, it can't have been that different back then, so how did we miss it before? But I think oftentimes you have to look at the full picture to really understand just how different prior metas were. There are so many things that go into what meta is good and what isn't. For example, missiles were popular in metas prior to the endgame Splatoon 2 missile meta, but they were good for different reasons. In this case, mostly being a factor of Mini being a really strong main weapon, for instance. What mattered to take missile into the meta was a bunch of different things. Pencil is a more recent example, more people are going to get those, so I'll talk about that. Between Tacticooler being weaker, Pencil being weaker, and other options not being in the game, there's a ton of different things as to why Pencil was lower, but I'd like to most talk about the meta at the time. Crab completely halted any ability to run forward with Cooler, and Pencil had no way of dealing with Crab. It's not just that the weapon had strengths that got buffed over time, it's that the weapon strengths that it had were not valuable in that meta. They became valuable when the meta shifted to the more fight-heavy style we have right now, where Pencil's ability to bully other weapons while providing a consistent special and team composition to run more of those weapons is what makes it so good. That wasn't something you ever wanted back then. We're even seeing this shift today, where more HP specials like Bubble and Crab being popular have made Edit more competitive and basically killed off double Cooler comps. And that is every question I want to cover this time. Thanks so much for submitting. It was fun to answer some of your guys' stuff about the Splatoon scene that wouldn't fit in a normal video. I'll see you all later.